Hello, in this video I'm going to go over how to build for DPS environments so that you can learn how to kind of know your numbers, build your own way, and maybe try something new outside of the normal meta. So let's get into it. It's going to be kind of a long video, so I will say that up front. I will put chapters in the video so that you can jump around if you want to. Um, any videos that I reference or I should say subjects that I reference that I've already done a video on. I will also link those in the description, so check those out if you're interested. But let's get right into it. So understanding the caps that are in the game, the critical damage cap and the penetration cap are very important to focus on so that you can get a really effective, powerful build. Um, the penetration cap is 18,200 and the critical damage cap is at 125%. Now this 18,000 is in dungeons and trials and arenas, whatnot. Um, for solo and overland kind of environments, those are 9,000. So we'll get into that. But the critical damage cap is at 125. So you just want to pay attention to how you are building that. I have done critical damage videos in the past. I'll just link my DPS playlist in there in case there's some video that you want to check out that I've done in addition to some of the other stuff. So the critical chance, every player starts off with 10%. So whatever you add on to your build, either by class, skill line, or gear set or whatnot, or weapon type, this can be affected. So you just want to pay attention to this. Good idea is to try and to get up and over 50% to see if you can critically strike more often than not. So that's a good indicator there. If you've got a good build, if you've got some good critical chance on your build, then you're going to also want to make sure that this is stacked up pretty high so that when this happens, or I should say when your critical chance hits, then this will be a large amount. The base critical damage that you start off with is 50%, and so you've got 75% left to build into, either getting buffs from your tank and healer or other group members, or if you just build into it yourself. So just know your numbers there on what you're building, and this is going to be kind of the base of what you build off of. So understanding what you've got going on in your group or your solo scenario will give you a smart foundation to build off of. So in Overland, your penetration level for questing, world bosses, delves, public dungeons, and whatnot, you're going to want to try and hit the 9,000 mark. This will help you rip through everything to where you're going to have an easy time. Now, this table here is kind of a staple for every scenario, but in Overland, it's a little bit different. So you're going to want to have Major Brutality and Sorcery, which increases your weapon damage by 20%. Either need to get this from a skill line skill or a passive or a potion. So just make sure that this is present on your build. Also, Major Prophecy and Savagery. When you have this on your build, it's going to increase how often you critically strike by 12%. And then again, if you're running a build that doesn't have that available in the skills or the skill lines, then you want to use a potion to get that build, the buff in your build. Your back bar weapon should always be an infused weapon trait with a weapon damage glyph. This will give you 452 weapon damage on your back that translates to your entire kit because it's just weapon damage. So it's going to increase the damage that you do in exponentially. You want to put that on every build. So really quickly, there are certain skills that you want to run on your back bar in order to keep that weapon glyph active at all times while the skill is on. If you're running a back bar destruction staff, then that's the Wall of Elements. If you're running a back bar bow, then you want to use volley. If you're running a two-handed sword, then you want to use the stampede skill, or critical charge is the base. If if you're running dual wield, then the skill is Quick Cloak. So keep that in mind. Those are the skills that keep your weapon glyph active at all times. So the next thing up that I'm going to recommend is that you run the Ring of the Pale Order. Why is that? Is because it just makes it easy mode, so you can just chill out, relax, and you're just not going to die in most cases. The Ring of the Pale Order is extremely powerful, especially if you're implementing these 3 buffs right here. These are going to increase the performance of the Ring of the Pale Order really, really, really well. So if you don't have the Ring of the Pale Order, I have a video on that. I will link it in the description. So go ahead and look for that. If you don't have the Ring of the Pale Order, I would highly recommend that you go out and get that. If you're just starting out playing the game and you don't have the Ring of the Pale Order, the 2 main things that I would suggest that you do if you're going to look at doing Overland zone questing or whatnot, go get a companion and build it as a tank. I've done a video on that. I will link that in the description. And then get the Ring of the Pale Order. If you have those 2 things implemented, then that's going to increase your ability to do this much, much greater ability. You can have your tank companion hold a world boss or one of the elite ads while you just kind of stand around and do damage on it. It's a lot easier to do rather than you having to dodge a heavy attack while you're doing stuff. So that's a really easy way for beginners and new people to the game. Go get a companion and build it as a tank, and then use the Ring of the Pale Order. Really, really helpful stuff there. But anyway, the skill type, I should say build type that you're doing, either a standard spammable and execute or a beam build. You want to choose which one you're wanting to do there and then build around it. That's kind of where you would start, I would think. If you're doing a beam build, then you kind of know you're doing a beam build. If you're not going to do a beam build, then there's a lot more things to choose from. So just kind of think ahead of what you're doing. Try to coordinate your skill lines and your gear sets that you're using to make sure that they synergize. And for example, they're all doing the same type of damage that's being buffed by your skill line, that kind of thing. Very common thing that I do is I'll run the Sorcerer's Storm Calling skill line with the Aedric Spear, because the spammable from the Aedric Spear does physical damage if you're running the stamina version, and the Sorcerer skill line buffs shock and physical damage. So there's kind of an added on increase to your toolkit there. One of my favorite builds that I have created that has really surprised me on how well it does in the night market, especially just running around solo. It's really, really fun, and that is the Tactical Blade Storm. I will put the link in the description in the video if you want to check out that build and you're wanting to follow a build video, then I'll throw that in there in case that's something you're wanting to do. But that build is basically a physical damage, AoE damage over time, just really, really fun visual build to play. You can put it on a Templar, Sorcerer, or Necromancer. Any one of those will work. That's what it's set up on. So you got some flexibility there, but moving on. The next thing you want to make sure you have is AoE damage over time. Really, really important to make sure you've got a lot of damage ticking on multiple things, because the Ring of the Pale Order is going to heal you more when you do that. Also, you want to keep in mind the damage skill lines that you're picking and the gear sets that you're running. You want to make sure those all kind of work together. If you're running the Sorcerer's Storm Calling, make sure you're choosing shock and physical damage. If you scribe a skill, for example, choose one of these 2, because those are buffed by 5% from the Storm Calling. These both do direct damage if they proc the status effect associated with that. So you may want to test out your build with a Battle Scrolls. I would highly recommend that if you've not seen the Battle Scrolls add-on. I will link that in the description as well. I've done a video on battle scrolls. Really important to analyze your build to see what type of damage you're doing. Damage over time, AoE, single target, whatnot, direct damage. Make sure you understand what is living on your kit so that you know how to buff it. Doesn't necessarily mean you got to change everything on your build. Maybe you've got the wrong CP slotted and you just didn't know it. Go do a parse on a group of enemies or on a trial dummy to see what your build is actually doing, and then lean into that type of damage, either damage over time, single target, AoE, whatever the case may be. Move around some CP nodes and see which ones you got to slot in order to increase the build that you're working with. And then lastly, the food that you're running, this is going to be a game changer in terms of sustain. I see a lot of builds online that reference running stuff with max health. Really, in most cases, I recommend not doing that because if you know the mechanics, you don't need a large health bar. Most of the stuff is scaled to your health bar to hit harder if you've got a bigger health bar. And so trying this out, I guarantee you're going to have an easier time. You're going to have more maximum stamina or magicka, depending on which one of these you're running. And then it gives you an absolute ton of recoveries to work with. So this is really going to kind of feel like coming up out of the water and taking a deep breath. If you put these foods on here, they're easy to build, they're cheap, they don't require anything expensive like a perfect row or anything like that. So give these two foods a try: lava foot soup and ghastly eyeball. So moving on to dungeon content, I'm just kind of gonna preface that I'm working with what the beam meta build does and kind of what you want to look to try and hit if you want to kind of get in the ballpark of getting the same type of performance. The beam build is extremely powerful for a couple of reasons. One, it packs in a lot of penetration on their build so that there's not a whole lot left for support to handle. It also has a ton of critical damage, so it's easy to hit the critical damage cap, and it's powerful. It hits cleave damage and has a lot of weapon damage in it. So it's hitting those three areas really, really well. And so if you're wanting to kind of step away from a beam build and perform well, then you're going to want to focus on your penetration, how much critical damage you have, and then make sure you have cleave damage in there as well. Um, you don't want to be on a heavy attack sorcerer anymore in this game because you're basically a single target killer, and that's not going to help get through trash packs very well. And that's kind of why they kind of have a little bit of a stink on them, is because they don't hit in a cleave. You can definitely build a heavy attack sorcerer to have cleave damage, but it's probably going to not include running the pets because that's eating up a lot of your bar space and you're just not going to do a lot of damage with that setup. So just keep that in mind. That's why the heavy attack sorcerer Oaken Soul setup is kind of getting left in the dust, is because a lot of these builds now, especially with subclass, they're getting a lot of AoE damage that's hitting a lot of different stuff, especially with the Arcanist that came out. I did a really, basically the part one of this video series, uh, one of my most popular videos on the channel was building from the ground up a beam build to show you how to get away from the Arcanist, or excuse me, the one bar sorcerer. And so I'll link that video in the description. If you have by chance haven't seen it, then I'll link that as well. But that is my Arcanist build video, and it goes through detail as to why that is such an effective setup. But I'm just going to be touching on categories in this video as to what you can focus on to try and get into that neighborhood on a different build. So if you're on, these are all pretty much the same. You don't want to run the Pale Order Ring if you have a dedicated healer in group. If you've got a healer that's healing everybody, then take that off and run something different. Probably Velothi is going to be your best bet in most cases. So these are pretty much all the same here, but in dungeon content, you want to make sure you're getting in the neighborhood of 7,000. And the reason why I say 7,000 is because that leaves only 3 buffs that, or debuffs, I should say, that your tank has to handle that are probably going to be present anyway. And that would be Major and Minor Breach, and either one of the next two, either an Infused Crusher weapon damage, or excuse me, Infused Crush weapon on the back bar, or if they're using a Runic Sunder taunt from the Soldier of Apocrypha Arcanist skill line. Um, Once those 3 things are implemented and you have 7,000 penetration, you're pretty much at the pen cap, and it's easier to clear stuffs. It just makes it easy if you build up to about 7,000 penetration. Now you can change the penetration on your build in several different ways. You can run a sharpened weapon, or you can run a sharpened mace if you really need that extra increase in penetration. Or you possibly could just switch out your Mundus from the Thief to the Lover. That's a really easy thing that you can just try and then switch back if it doesn't work. It doesn't require any any materials or transmute crystals. You can pop on a different Mundus and see if that will do the trick just for the scenario that you're running. Maybe this is a trials build that you normally run, and you need a little extra penetration because maybe you're not running with a full-blown tank. Who knows? Switch over to the lever, get your penetration up, and then you'll probably perform a lot better for that scenario. And you can always just put your Mundus back on to where it was. It's a really easy switch out. But that would be my recommendation. Make sure that your penetration is right in the neighborhood of 7,000 for grouped content. That's basically where the beam meta is, and if you show up with this, then everybody's pretty much at the same level. So for trials content, this is pretty much the same. The only thing is the difference in dungeon content. For a Ring of a Pale Order, you can run this when you're grouped with 3 people and still get some use out of it. You just don't want to run it if you've got a healer. In trials, you definitely do not want to run the Ring of the Pale Order, because once you group with more than 5 people, you're not getting anything out of it. It's basically just a dead spot that you're getting the buff of the Bloodthirsty trait with the weapon damage increase. So just make sure you're not running the Pale Order ring in trials, because the other thing is healers that are there cannot heal you, and so you're going to die, and they're going to know what's going on pretty easily because your health bar looks different. So this is not something that you can kind of sneak in. They're going to be able to know that you're running that, so just don't do it. Again, build accordingly with your spammable execute, or if you're running a beam build, and then all of this is still the same. But we're going to talk about a little bit different of a scenario if you're trying out builds, what you need to bring to a dummy parse. This is really important because um, if you take your setup that you bring into content onto the parse, you probably have a lot of stuff on there that you don't need to, and you can kind of stack differently if you want to see how high you can hit. For example, the beam meta with the Arcanist, Herald of the Tome, the Templar Aedric Spear, and the Assassination skill line from Nightblade. You don't even have to slot a front bar Templar skill to get the increased critical damage, because the Parse dummy gives you so much buffs in there. You don't need to do that. So if you understand what kind of penetration is present on the dummy already, and this is all you need to bring for a dummy parse, regardless of what build you're running, 1,170. That's all that's left. Now, how do you take care of this? Really simple. There's a CP passive that gives you 700 penetration, and then there's one piece of light armor will give you enough penetration to handle this right here. So you don't need to fret about what gear piece or whatever, what weapon. All you have to do is have that CP slot, or excuse me, passive filled in, and wear one piece of gear that is light, and that will handle it. You don't ever want to run a Pale Order ring on a trial dummy parse, because that's just not going to give you an optimal damage. You don't need heals if you're parsing. You just run something different. So don't ever run the Pale Order Ring on a parse whatsoever. The one caveat for a parse Pale Order Ring, if you're wanting to figure out what your Pale Order build does, then I would recommend doing that on a 3 million dummy, because that's going to be kind of more true to content out in the open where you're going to use it. But you don't want to run that on the trial dummy. It's just not going to give you an accurate view of what your damage is. So the 3 million and the 6 million dummy, these do not give you buffs. They also don't have any resistances stripped away. They're basically, you're hitting something without anybody helping you out. And so this will tell you what your build is truly doing. A 3 million dummy is more for newer players, or if you're testing a Pale Order build. And then the 6 million dummy is really kind of where the true parse lives in terms of what you're doing, because this is going to tell you what your build actually does. If somebody's in a trial and their tank is stripping away all the armor, but then you go into another trial and your tank is not, for some reason, applying major breach, you're going to see a big difference in your performance. Well, that tells you that your build is not doing what you're looking at there in either scenario. You need to look at what your build actually does with absolutely no help, and then you can kind of do that on this 6 million dummy. The other reason why this is important is because the life bar is big enough to where you can really test your rotation and your sustain. If you kill the 3 million dummy, you might not get a good look at that. So if you're really trying to test something out, I would recommend the 6 million dummy. If you're wanting to see what your build is going to do in a raid where they are coordinating the buffs that they should be there for the most part, then the 21 million dummy is where you want to do that. But you should never bring a parse build into content. I want to stress that. Parse builds are parse builds. You need to understand that you need to handle penetration differently when you go into content. You can't just bring a parse build that's only bringing this type of penetration and think that it's going to run as well as it did on the dummy, because you don't have a guarantee that this penetration here is being addressed by your team. I would say probably in most pug situations, you're lucky to get half of this. So be careful with what you're bringing into content. If you're in a coordinated group and you know that everything's being addressed, then this might be okay. Who knows? It just be aware of what your team is doing, and make sure that you're running a coordinated performance there. So the buffs that the parse dummy gives you, why I'm bringing this up, this is stuff that you want to focus on bringing to your trials team so that their DPS builds perform similarly to what they do on a parse. If they try out a build and then they come to a trial and then, for example, Major Courage is not present because you don't have a healer wearing Spell Power Cure, then they're not going to perform as well. And the first thing that's going to get called out is, hey, damage is a little low. There's not a lot of people that are going to look at it and say, okay, well, are we missing buffs? They're just going to go straight to the DPS hitting like a noodle. Well, the basis of that might be some of this stuff right here is not in the group. So some of this stuff is not necessarily has to staple be there. For example, Major Force, the way I build my trial team, if I'm going to run one, I don't use this. I've got another video that I'm going to do after this one where I cover that, but I don't use Warhorn in a coordinated group because I can hit the critical damage cap at all times without it. And so I've done a video on the critical damage cap and how to hit that easy. I will link that in the description, but also keep an eye out for the next video in this series that I'm going to do, and that will cover that whole trial team setup. But the buffs that are present on the Parse dummy, basically Major Force increases your critical damage by 20%. Major Courage gives you 430 weapon and spell damage. This is normally provided by the healer running Spell Power Cure. Minor Courage is a very common buff now. It used to be only basically provided by the tank set Claws of Yolnahkrin, but it is now very easy to obtain through either scribing or having an Arcanist healer running the Xena's powering discs. Major Slayer, this can be provided by a Rojo healer, or if they're not running Rojo, you can run War Machine, or Master Architect is really good in dungeons. That's a really massive uh, buff to give your group in a dungeon. Minor Brutality, this used to be provided from the Earthen Heart skill line. It has been moved to the Draconic Power skill line on the DK. So this one is not going to be as common anymore unless your tank is running the Draconic Power skill line. So in terms of the opposite of this, Minor Sorcery from the Templar Dawn's Wrath, this is probably going to be the more common buff in the group, because if they have a Templar running the Dawn's Wrath skill, this will be basically addressing that gap. And then the two, Minor Savagery, comes from an Assassination Nightblade. This is probably almost going to be guaranteed 99.9% of the time to be in the group. And so Minor Prophecy, this comes from the Dark Magic skill line from the Sorcerer. This is going to be extremely rare if you see this buff in the game. Dark Magic is probably, I would say, the #1 leader in terms of needing help. It is the most mixed up and messed up skill line in the game that doesn't know what it wants to be. It's got a DPS spammable tucked into a healer skill line with not a lot of good offensive passives. So I know they're reworking the classes going forward. I don't quite remember the order that it is, but hopefully they organize the sorcerer a little bit more. I'm hoping they put the spammable down into the storm calling set so that we have a pure DPS skill line from the sorcerer. I think that would really help out the sorcerer to have that kind of implemented, to have crystal frags moved out of there. So let's move on. Minor Berserk is also present on the dummy. This not really necessarily something that support provides, but is usually present because you've slotted Camo Hunter from the Fighters Guild, and that will usually get this to be active at all times. And then Minor Toughness will come from a healer running the Green Balance skill line from the Warden. The bottom two here are just sustain friendly buffs, and you're probably not going to see these in trial groups because these come from 5-piece gear sets. And honestly, these sustain numbers here, if you're going to eat up a 5-piece set, these are kind of underwhelming in terms of what they give you. So if you're looking for adding sustain, I would say there are better ways to do it than running these two. But that just goes into saying sustain should not be ignored. It still should be addressed. But there are better sets to do that with, and I will address that in the next video that I cover, where I'm covering the trials team. So this right here should not be ignored. It just should be handled a different way. So the debuffs that are on a trial dummy are Major and Minor Breach and Infused Crusher. Those all address penetration, along with Roar of Alkosh, which is another penetration debuff. So this is where you get your 17,000 penetration from right here. This is really what you want to focus on if you're building a trials team. You don't necessarily have to have these specific, but you want to make sure that the amount that you're handling is addressed. Major Vulnerability. This increases the damage that the dummy takes by 10%. This is normally handled by either a Colossus from the Gravelord skill line from Necromancer, or if you have a tank running Turning Tide, or one of the new sets from Magickasteal, the Stone Hulk set. I don't quite remember the name of that. It's too new for me to have in my memory bank. Maybe I'll get it there in a couple months. We'll see. Minor vulnerability basically can be activated from shock damage. Also, the Gravelord's graveyard skill, one of the morphs will do minor vulnerability as well. Minor brittle increases the dummy's critical damage taken and counts towards the 125% critical damage cap. So, didn't mean to do that. Let's get back up here. So your critical damage on the dummy is coming from major force as well as the debuff minor brittle, and then also one piece or one element of elemental catalyst. It only has the flame version on the dummy. If you're going to have somebody run elemental catalyst, then this really will do a lot more. It'll do 15%, but this is kind of a more niche setup now because it is so easy to hit the critical damage cap. One more debuff that's on the trial dummy is Engulfing Flames, which makes the dummy take 5%, or excuse me, 6% more flame damage. Just make sure you're aware this skill does not do that in content anymore. When they did the Dragon Knight rework, it no longer applies this 6% flame damage increase. So just be aware of that. You're only going to get that buff on the trial dummy. So if you're running a flame damage build, you may hit a little bit harder on the dummy than you do in content because of that. Because this 6% flame damage taken is not present anymore on the dummy, or excuse me, in content. Off balance, this is another really important one to make sure is in your group. If you're running this exploiter CP, you want to make sure that you are proccing off balance as often as possible. How you do that is to run a back bar shock staff on one of your group members and have them lay down Wall of Elements consistently, and that should take care of that so that your entire group can run exploiter with no problem. The other debuff that's present on the dummy is a sustain debuff. This is a huge sustain helper right here, especially for Magicka, and that is the minor Magickasteal. This restores Magicka in the amount of 168 per second when you are damaging the dummy. And so just remember, if you're looking at recoveries, those tick once every 2 seconds. So this equates to 336 recoveries just from this debuff alone. This is really going to help your tanks out. If you're on a healer build, look at implementing this right here. If you don't know where to get that, instead of running elemental susceptibility on a healer, your tanks are probably running that to obtain major and minor breach. Switch the morph to the elemental drain. That will make it so that the debuff lasts for a whole minute and it does minor Magickasteal instead. And that will get that buff in your group really easily. And it's also free to cast. So little switch off there that you can try to see if you can help your Magicka sustain in your group. So a scenario comparison at a glance. This will just kind of give you a good what your enemy armor is, what your penetration target should be. All of this bringing everything recommended Pale Order ring only with no healer, and figure all these out here. I'll just leave this on the screen in case you need to. For dungeons and trials, these are the penetration marks you need to hit. And then on the dummy, here are your numbers here. This armor here is actually wrong. This is basically what it's starting with, and this is what you're left with. So, and then these numbers are again as long as your tanks are handling major minor breach and either runic sunder or an infused crusher, not both, just one of those. Then all you need is 7,000. So your critical damage resources, in order to hit the 114% that the beam meta hits. How do you do that? This is the easy part. On a beam build, this is why these are so strong. They have the 50% base. You slot Fighting Finesse. Backstabber is only useful on the dummy. I would say don't run this in content, because if your enemies are facing you, such as in Sunspire or something like that, then this is going to turn off. So in content, I would run Fighting Finesse. If you're parsing, run Backstabber, because the dummy's not going to turn around on you. So for the running numbers for what a beam meta build does, you have 50% and 8, so that's 58. Then everybody's running 6 medium armor pieces, so there's another 12%. Then you're going to get a hemorrhage passive from that increases 10%. Aedric Spear gives you 12 by slotting, and then you have Fated Fortune, and then all-time Minor Force. You add all of those up, it's 114% critical damage. And so the only thing that's left for your group to handle is to have a tank run Lucent Echoes. That's it. And then you can run the entire team, or the entire time, at full damage. These are what's on the dummy here. You've got one piece of Elemental Catalyst, Minor Brittle, Minor Force, and then Major Force. Minor Force is not on the dummy. You need to figure that out. But Elemental Catalyst, if you run it in content, you can get up to 15%. And then Lucent Echoes is an absolute staple, in my opinion. But the dummy gives you 35% towards the critical damage cap. And so all you have to do is bring 40%. So if you're trying to figure out what you need on the dummy, you need to build 40% more damage in the critical department and bring about 1100 penetration. So that'll give you some flexibility on how to build for the dummy. So here's your benchmark to target. This is what a beam build brings. So if you're wanting to try and hit those numbers, they basically have right around 6,000 damage with a weapon critical rating. This is how often it happens, of just about 61%. And then their penetration is about 7,200. So that's why the beam build performs so well, is because they have all of this baked into their toolkit without even really leaning into it. And so, as I said, this is the 114 critical damage right here. If you add just the 11% from Lucent Echoes, you can passively run at the critical damage cap without using Warhorn, worrying about minor brittle uptimes, and there's no burst windows. Your entire trial is a burst at the entire critical damage cap, and you are handling penetration 100% of the time. So you don't have to worry about the two statistics that give you fits in most groups, which is penetration and critical damage. These are handled 100% of the time. If you pay attention to that and build like that, then you'll be able to achieve that. So very long video, I know, but we're going to do something fun to close it out here. We're going to go into the YouTube here, and we're going to go on to my YouTube channel. And I'm just going to cover real quickly my YouTube songs that I have been working on. And so if you've never been to my YouTube channel, the actual channel, if you just click on my videos and that's it, I'm going to guide you as to where you can find all my content very easily. When you go onto my channel here, you just go to the playlist tab, and then this will take you to the screen where all of my videos are organized by subject matter. So the best thing to do is to go to the playlist tab. If you're just on the main screen here, you just scroll down to where it says created playlists right here. And so what we're going to do in this video to close it out, I'm just going to go over a couple of my shorts just to give you an example of some of the songs that I've got coming up. Glittering Gold just got released yesterday, so you don't need to hear that, but coming up, as you can see, I've got some stuff lined up here. I've got a song about the Vaults of Madness. This is called Stone Upon Stone. That'll be coming out this coming Friday. The date is May the 22nd. That song will be coming out. Then I've got another one coming out about Lyrinth. This song is called Fool Killer. This song will be coming out on the 29th of May. And then I've got another one called Immortal Crown. This will be coming out on the 5th of June. And this is about Rillis and the Banished Cells dungeons. And then this one's kind of a no-brainer. This song here is called Howl for Hercene. And that will be coming out in the middle of June. And then I've got one that I just finished up last night. This one is called Whispers from the Blade. It's the story of Narayaneth and the two Crypt of Hearts dungeons. So keep an eye on that. I've got those in the works. They're scheduled to come out, but I thought I would just kind of give you a sneak peek on what's to come on these in case you're interested. A lot of people maybe don't click on my music, and I'm trying to promote that just to get people to give it a chance, because in my opinion, they're fun to listen to. They're about the game, and I guarantee you, if you like this game, you'll like something that's in my music folder somewhere. They're all different genres. They're not all the same. But I'll just click through some of these. We'll listen to them. And then if you want to, if you're interested, you can go to the playlist here, go down to this Songs of Tamriel. This is where all of the full lyric videos are. And so I'm just going to go back into the shorts here, and we'll play the ones that are coming up in the next month or so. So we'll close out the video with this. If you want to watch these, great. If not, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. Have a great day, but we're going to end the video just listening to these. Thank you and goodbye.
Welcome to the Vaults of Madness. Welcome to the Artisan's Hell. Stone upon stone in the shadow of Baal. Every scream is a break in the wall. Welcome to the Vaults of Madness. Down where the damned never fell. Traitor erased. Rillis, won't you come on down? Where the dark, where the immortal crown. Lock the door, throw the key away. He'll be smiling on the judgment day. Immortal crown. He won't lie down. truth.